Wow, well, that was different. We just finished our first episode that featured a guest, and I would say it was a smashing success. And I don't think it's because of necessarily myself or Chicago, but we just had a guest who just articulated some incredible concepts and left me with a ton of aha moments. So I think you'll really enjoy what came together, and we're really excited to share it with you.
Yeah, our guest was Brennan today, and Brennan spoke all about nouns. Obviously, a lot of people in the NFT world know about the two forks that happen. And, there's some contentious folks in the Nouns DAO. But what really became a conversation, learning more about nouns, really went to the DAO, which is a decentralized autonomous organization, and the different kinds of DAOs and how they can make the organization of groups and people stronger, more streamlined, and more permissionless. So it fits right in with the decentralized ethos. And this was an awesome episode. I can't wait for you to hear it. And without further ado, enjoy.
Welcome to Decentralized Dawn, where lifelong friends Chicago and Disco navigate the ever-evolving crypto landscape. With genuine curiosity and a commitment to nuance as our North Star, we offer clear-eyed exploration. Our goal? To empower listeners with the tools and insights needed to flourish in this decentralized age.
All right, everybody, welcome to Decentralized Dawn. I am Chicago, and to my right now is Disco.
Hey, I made a move over to the right, so that's exciting.
Yeah, and we're both lefties, so we kind of fight for the spot, so we have to trade off. And we have a special guest today, Brennan. Thank you for being here, Brennan.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And we want to talk about nouns. And there's been so much going on with nouns. Obviously, there was a fork. That was big news. And now there's a second fork. But, there's also the DAO structure, in my opinion, probably the strongest DAO out there. And there's so many implications and ramifications for what happens to nouns in the greater ecosystem. So, I've been in crypto since 2015. Disco's newer to the game, so we're probably going to hit this at different depths and levels throughout, but we can go anywhere where we're comfortable with. So thanks for being here. And
yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate it. Not only you coming on short notice, but also I told Disco on very short notice. So I appreciate you jumping into, because I was super excited about this one. And ever since this fork happened, Brennan's been very vocal about it in one of our chat groups. And every time he said something, I was like, oh man, I'm learning more and more. So thanks for being here so we can kind of dig deeper.
Yeah, that's what it's all about for us, is just trying to explore and learn. And it's kind of a monumental moment with our first guest. So welcome and let the excitement roll.
I'm privileged. This is great. So yeah.
So I guess the best place to start is just, I don't want to go from the very beginning, but here, I'll share the screen here. I'm on the Nouns website. I'm actually on the playground right now, but let's go back to the main site and look. So Brennan, can you, for newer listeners or folks who aren't just completely doused in on-chain NFTs and NFTs, can you give just an overview of nouns for those listeners?
Yeah, so Nouns DAO was launched as a decentralized autonomous organization, and the way to get into that sort of voting body is by auctioning off a noun every single day. And that's sort of the nuance, was all the voting tokens, their distribution model is just once per day, right? Every 24 hours. And the money that goes from the auction goes into a decentralized treasury, which is controlled by the voting populace. And then people who own nouns can basically create proposals, so requests for funding, and or any request for any on-chain activity that uses something from the nouns contract, right? Which is today has exploded into a lot of other features. But a simple thing is, hey, I'm going to go, I'm going to throw a nouns party. I need, let's say, 10 ETH to do a really cool party. All the nouners are invited. Here's my proposal. And then that goes up and people vote for it. And if it passes, the money goes off to whatever address they applied for. And that was all structurally done. The proposal itself is a smart contract function. The votes are all smart contract functions. And the issuance of that money, once it's approved, goes directly to that wallet address, right? And then that user can, obviously commit the dollars to what they propose to do. Most of the time, that works. Sometimes it doesn't. And that's sort of Nouns DAO in a few sentences.
Wow.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So as far as proposals go, are they mostly geared towards promoting and getting the nouns word out itself?
Yeah. So most DAOs, when they were usually created, there's usually a purpose. There's like, hey, we're gonna create a DAO with a bunch of people who have a like-minded interest in doing X. One of the funniest ones to look back to is like the Constitution DAO. We're gonna put together a bunch of money to go bid on the Constitution, which was obviously hilarious, didn't work out. But in Nouns, it's a more unique and global, and I think it's only sort of becoming known now, like how powerful it is. But it's literally just the proliferate the nouns meme. And the nouns meme is the noggles. Think of the noggles as the Nike swish, right? It's just this brand icon. Except with nouns, that brand icon can literally be fit on anything and everywhere, and it actually works. And it's
and
kind
it
of one of
was
those
on a
crazy
2000, it was on the Super Bowl ad, sorry to interrupt, in 2021 or 22.
It was Super Bowl 2022, yeah.
And that was the
Coming out of
noggles, just the
I guess they call
glasses.
it Super Bowl 2021, but it was January or February 2020.
Yeah.
22. Okay. So it was about 18 months ago. And those noggles, it didn't even have the noun. It was just the famous square glasses with kind of the googly eyes, if you will, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
how
mean,
do we,
to me, that's actually what nouns more is. The cute characters are really just demonstrating the power, because a lot of the heads are like, this is a pickle head, right? They're anamorphic, right? So the idea is that nouns to me is the iconography is of the noggle. The noggle is more important than the noun character themselves. And we demonstrate that by literally putting the nouns icon on everything.
right.
So essentially, the main mission at this point, or at the genesis, was to create kind of a lifestyle brand around the noggle and make it very identifiable, and kind of put a bunch behind it to really launch it as a brand.
Yeah, make it the largest CCO brand in the world, right? Be
That's
as big
cool,
as
man.
Nike, Coca-Cola, Disney in terms of namespace, but it's fully CC0, as in anyone can use and change the treatment, and that's all we care about, right? Just
And then
proliferate.
that would be kind of the first real representation of a completely digital native brand, kind of going into that lifestyle era of compete, or of being on the same level as a Nike or a Coca-Cola, or things from that perspective.
I mean, I think so. I think we definitely have a really solid chance to do that.
Wow.
Yeah, so that is but you're right. That is like the end result, right?
So we're on Noun 876 now. When did this all start? So there's one noun minted a day in perpetuity forever, correct?
Yep. Yep. So let's start with let's go back. So if you click the back arrow, it will update it to the last one. So if you see, yeah, and then if you go into to URI and change it to 244, we'll start with mine. We'll start with my first noun.
I love
It's not the first one I bid on. I was bidding on a few of them, but this is the one where I went ham, and you can tell by the price that I went a little too ham.
Wow.
It's a long-term investment, people. It's a long-term investment.
So this was the noun that I won. It was the one that I was like, I am winning this noun no matter what, whatever. All financial obligations aside, this is the one I want. I want the duck. I want the cheese chain. This is it. This represents me.
It's fire.
And I had to start Discord messaging or Twitter messaging, DM people who were bidding to say, let me get this one. What would it do if you just stop bidding right now?
Back off, people. Back off.
Yeah. And I did.
You
get
know
some,
me.
hey, you're right. Cool. You take it. Like, no, it was a really good. There was some cooperation there, so it was good. But yeah, so this is my first one. But yeah,
which was March 18th of 22. So it says right there when you won it. So you got into Nouns. It started in 2021, like summer
August.
21.
Yeah. So if you change the URI to now, like, obviously 1.
There is a 0, right? Just like,
or there is a 0. 0 is the one that goes to the nouner. So it wasn't
went to the
one you
nouners,
could
right?
actually win. but you can see that go one more because the data
So,
format
yeah, something.
it broke it. Yeah.
That's so
So if you
funny.
go to one, you just click the forward arrow or type
Yeah,
in.
it
This
actually
is the
doesn't work.
first.
It's so broken. It's like I can't go to 1971. So okay, so here's noun one.
There
Old
you go. That's
Fox.
the real
Fox said,
auction.
"Damn." So
But
613 ETH for noun one. So just big buzz. This was not off the radar. This wasn't a slow build. This was. I mean, that's huge. That's
the team that
absolutely
they put
huge.
together, I always state this, like, we have a documentary coming out, and this is sort of, which is really cool, from the Stupid Buddy Studios, with Seth Green or Seth Rogen. Sorry, Seth Green. I can't
Wow.
remember which Seth. I always forget. But one of the things I say is, if you took the founders, which they're called the Nounders, and you
Right.
told them, go build anything, any startup, any industry, I do believe they would revolutionize it. I think they would make a successful company. I think it was one of the greatest startup teams that could exist at the time coming into Web3. They chose to make Nouns, and I think that it
Wow.
has been a success. But the the luxury of a startup is, like, you kind of control. You have shareholders. You have some dedicated investors and stuff like that. But you can make and maximize that a lot faster. Where Nouns is so novel that it has to grow. But I do think it's going to be one of those things that they're going to be looked at, as these insane and amazing founders. So I think people, and they came from the CryptoPunks community,
Yep.
and so I think why it went so hard so fast was because I think a lot of people respected what they were trying to pull off and wanted to get in early, because obviously in crypto, early is better, right? And coming from
Yeah.
ordinals, we know that index numbers mean a lot.
Well, they do to us, and thank goodness now that we've learned it, they do to the devs and everybody else too. That was a
Exactly.
holding breath moment, and that episode on ordinals will be officially released probably next week. But Disco and I
That
are.
it kind of ties what you were saying kind of ties to something that we talked about when we were in Chicago, and I got into it a little bit during the Azuki episode, which is, and you were touching on, I think that it's really important for people to understand that if you're really trying to build something and have, something become kind of a lifestyle brand and break out and, have cultural relevance and everything, it's not going to happen on the time frame that people expect, especially in this short term kind of crypto mindset. It's like, okay, why isn't it at the top right now? Or how come we're
Right.
not, it took a while for Supreme. It took a while for these brands to kind of take hold, and you can't, if you want to be authentic and you want to be true to what, kind of the core ethos and, what's attractive about it, you got to give it time to breathe. You're just sitting down to breakfast, and then people are like, why aren't we there? Why isn't it, why aren't we on Netflix? It's like,
Yeah.
it takes a while, man.
That's a really
Yeah.
good point. Yeah, he talked me off the Azuki ledge because I'm like, why aren't they doing more? And he's like, dude, look at it from a startup perspective. It's been 18 months. I'm like, yeah, but elementals and rug and money. And so he allowed me to walk off the ledge, but that's such a good point. These things take time. Like if you're not looking, especially these on-chain assets like Nouns and CryptoPunks and certainly Bitcoin ordinals, if you're not looking at these with a 10 plus year time horizon, like you're
They're
looking
silly.
at it too
Yeah.
short.
Yep.
Right. So tell me a little bit about the founders and the Nounders. I know 4156 was a big crypto punk in the early days. And with the whole Larva Labs thing, I don't know fully what happened, but I know he left the crypto punks. I assume there was some drama there, and then formed the Nouns with the Nounders, and there's like 3 or 4 of those guys. Can you tell us a little more about
I
that?
think the original was, I might be wrong, but it's like 7 or 8. But a lot of them have
Okay.
left to go do other projects pretty early on. Um, and so, I don't, without getting too much into the drama, it wasn't too much drama. It's more that a lot of them have pursued, the ones that have stayed have made Nouns like their project, their life, right? So it was on, his thing is like, let's remove distractions and focus on what matters. And I think that's important. I mean, every startup founder, and again, I want to treat Nouns like a startup,
Yeah.
but it's a startup made up of technically originally 10 or so founders, and now has grown to hundreds of founders. We're all founders as part of this DAO, and it does require all of us to dedicate time and contribute. You could sit back and not do anything. That works, but it doesn't work well, right? You're not actually helping grow whatever investment you put in, because you are putting in money. right? So it's interesting where a DAO allows that to happen, where just buying a traditional NFT, you don't need to contribute anything. You can just hold that NFT, and if obviously the art value appreciates, or if it's a
Right.
utility one, the utility appreciates. Where Nouns, as a holder, you should be participating because you are part of that sort of mechanism to make it succeed, right? So it's definitely a different type of project.
So it's interesting that, everyone's kind of involved in, participation, super critical kind of to the overall success. And then, you liken it to, because of the DAO. And then when we were looking at it and the little research I pulled together, like it really does have a feel of a very pure kind of DAO. And I know we did an episode that just came out where we were talking about the purest kind of storage of NFTs and how, you can do things off chain or, all the different elements. But looking at this, it seems like it's got some severe, a lot of purity at the heart of it, and really represents, what a DAO in its purest form could represent, all the positives. Is that kind of on track? Or
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of harks back to, everything is on chain. And I know you guys mentioned Nouns of the art, starts on chain. So even at the token level, everything is built around the token contracts, and basically the DAO contract themselves, right? Where it's fully permissionless. There's no restriction. Anyone can come in here and put in money to auction, win a noun, which is a voting, put up a proposal, have that proposal pass or fail, and have that actual transaction execute with no one running anything. Like all of this could be run with nothing. Now, obviously, groups have come up to put together what's called clients. So like nouns.wtf is a centralized client, and maybe in the future is not, as we get better with, HTML protocol distribution. But
Right.
You could just go to the smart contract and interact with all the things that you're nicely displayed here. And so it's one of those things where money flows in and out, and the tokens get operated with no restrictions, except for one. But it is a DAO restriction where there is a multi-sig that can do a veto. So it is the purest form with one side effect, but it can be turned off. So it is something that is controlled by the DAO themselves. Anyone can put up a vote to say, hey, I want to turn off the veto. The veto is controlled by the foundation, which is the Nouns Foundation in the Cayman Islands, that basically the legal entity that runs Nouns. Because we do live in a world where you do need a legal body for a lot of these things, mostly
Right.
as big as Nouns is. And if they've never used it, we did one test, which I was a proponent of. I was like, hey, you have this veto, but you've never tested it. Let's actually test it. And it's the only veto they've ever done. We put up a proposal that just said test the veto, and they vetoed it. And that was that.
I thought they did veto something super early. No, never.
Nope.
Okay.
They never used it.
Because the Nounders have, so if you take every 10, so we're at 876. So they have about 88, 87 nouns, correct? So they've got 10% of the collection. So obviously a big voting block there. But you're saying this is a decentralized DAO. As decentralized as it can get. We're going to get way more into DAOs as we go through this. But you're saying there is that one caveat of the veto. And why was the veto put in, and was that a good idea?
Yeah, the veto was put in to protect full liquidation. So as more people started buying in, they wanted to control to make sure that, it doesn't have the failure to start mechanism, right? Where it just kind of gets abused and broken. And basically they just wanted to put in that restriction. Now they've all publicly come out and say, we will basically never use the veto. And people have requested them, mostly with the forking contract coming online, like use the veto, stop the fork, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, no, that's not, the DAO had generated a legit contract and implemented it. And this is what people wanted. And it allowed people to operate decentrally. Right. And again, we haven't turned off the veto because I don't think we need to, but we could, again, I could go in and write a proposal that literally changes the flag from true to false, and that could go up for a vote and it could pass.
So they've got 10%. So that's where that could pass. They vote with their 10%, and, different political groups within the Nouns ecosystem get together, and is it a 50.1%, like a majority win?
It's a scaling. So we in V1 or sorry V2 of the contracts. So we've been updating with this team called the Verbs, which basically works at the low level protocol for nouns.
Okay.
And one of the first things we implemented was basically a kind of like a reverse bonding curve for how the difficulty to pass is. So basically, the more negative votes you get, your consensus to pass, which is your first threshold. So you have to first pass the consensus threshold, which is you have to get enough for votes above the threshold of consensus, which starts at, I believe it's at 20%, but we've changed it a few times. But then it goes higher and higher as you get more negative votes. Then you need to pass at least one vote greater than the negative votes once you pass consensus. So you get enough attention for the 4 votes, but then you still have to beat the negative votes.
Just so I get it. So the consensus threshold, whatever it is now, we'll call it 20%. You're saying then there's another vote as long as it's above that and going upwards, so you're getting more traction, then it's still alive. Is that right?
No, not so difficult like that. It's just saying is you have, let's say you have, for and against, right? Well, you have abstain, but we won't count that.
Right.
If you first need to get, and this isn't 2 votes, it's the same vote. It's just how you look at the actual passing requirement. You have to first reach consensus in the number of 4 votes, right? So let's say it's 50. So we hit 50, great. Technically, this vote is now can be passed potentially. But let's say the number of negative votes was 60, right? So you still have to beat the negative votes once you pass consensus. So you still need 61, but you don't need like a hyper majority. You just need one more vote than the negative once you reach consensus.
Okay. So consensus is like 20% of the people have to be interested to put this on the block. After that, it just has to outdo the nays. The ayes have to beat the nays. Okay.
But the thing that we implemented was the more nays you have, your consensus threshold goes up. That's the sort of parameter to make it where if you have a lot of negative votes, it should require you more. And we have tailored that growth ratio a few times. And I think it's at a good spot right now. But yeah.
Okay, that totally makes sense. So how are nouns, and we're going to go all over a little, but you touched on so many important points. I'm just gonna go and Disco chime in too.
It's massive DAO. There's a lot of things.
Yeah, you tried to explain to me the other day when I was doing my ordinals prep, and I appreciate everything you did to kind of help me get it up there for that show. How are punks on chain on Ethereum different? How are nouns and punks different? Because I think they are, right? I know they're both on chain. Punks came on chain after their genesis, but you were explaining this whole 256 thing on nouns, how they're compiled.
Yeah, basically it's a base 64 hash of the SVG rendering. So any client can basically uncompile out that base 64, like the huge hash, right? That you can store. And it will create you an SVG of this image. I'm actually didn't do the research. I don't know exactly how Punks is on chain. I should probably follow up on that. It could be the same thing because it's pretty easy to create pixel art, SVGs from pixel art, and being able to store those on chain is actually quite it's pretty trivial versus some other things like non pixel art related art is a little bit harder.
Got it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure punks are SVGs, but we'll just stick with nouns for now. But you're saying the cool thing about nouns is they are actually compiled on the EVM on chain to render on the fly this SVG. Is that a good summary of that?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like using shorthand notes to describe an image, like what do they call it, cryptic notes, like where like you can assign these series of letters to a much more massive thing that exists, because nouns are only made up of finite traits, right? There's only so many heads, so many Noggle types, so many bodies, so many attributes, so many backgrounds that you can shorthand those SVGs in their full rendering to shorthand hashes, right? You can split up a hash in a number of bytes and be able to assign those values, right? And that's kind of the encoding of it.
And the beauty of an SVG image file, once it's compiled, is it's still a very, it can scale up moderately, but it's a teeny file size, correct?
Yeah, it's much smaller. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So I don't want to get too off track here, but I'm curious because you're probably one of the only people I know who would know this answer. Are on-chain NFTs, punks, nouns, autoglyphs, are those synonymous and as immutable, if you will, assuming both chains survive, as a Bitcoin ordinal?
Again, I think, and you mentioned this before, let's say the contract security is in place, right? Where obviously you can't have, leaked keys to control the contract to be able to delete it. Obviously if the Nouns DAO votes to destroy the contract, you're not going to have operable tokens. Now you can have a snapshot and look back in time and say, oh, well, I did have an operating token through this contract and now it's untransferable, but it's a sole token and it did look like X, right? Because you still have enough data in previous blocks to represent that. So it's immutable in the sense that you won't change the history, but you can change the future of it, right? Where ordinals technically is the same thing. You own a SAT that has the witness images of all the of something that was inscribed. Reinscription allows us to reinscribe the same SAT with a new image. You technically didn't change the past, but you are changing the future of what that SAT represents. Now the SAT
that SAT doesn't. You can have two images on the same SAT. It doesn't remove the first one, and that's when we're getting into cursed SATs and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, well, I don't think they're cursed. It's just they didn't think about these solutions at the time, and they just named them a curse because they were like, we don't really know what to do with them now. Let's just call them curse because that's kind of cool.
It is kind of cool.
It's fascinating. I think cursed is the best marketing term, whether they meant to or not, for Bitcoin ordinals. And I am so thankful, at least, that will be grandfathered in early. And it sounds like they will stay. I don't know. Cause I think going negative numbers and ordinals, like I said, is like a 3D Star Trek chess set, and NFTs are like checkers. Not that NFTs are bad. There's great artists, there's great collections, there's on-chain, and I love the Ethereum chain. But like you said, ordinals, once they're inscribed, they're on chain. They're inscribed. As long as the Bitcoin chain lasts, they're there forever. And the most important point you're saying about NFTs is, yes, a lot of these are on chain, but you can still change ownership. You can still change the contract. So you can still, in some ways, unless you freeze
and lock, and then it's immutable. So you can turn any Ethereum contract and token into an immutable token, like an immutable NFT. It's actually, honestly, that's the easiest thing to do. It's actually harder to keep all the functions allowing you to change it. But if you wrote a really dumb, simple contract that you're not even the owner, you just issue tokens and they exist, right? That's totally fair, and that works, and they're immutable at that point if the art was already on chain, right?
What amazes me is how many collections are out there, even though, we talked about IPFS being kind of it's off chain, but it's still this new long-term storage. Then you have to ask, but is it? It's just amazing that beyond all that, you have to wrestle with that, but you also have to wrestle with, why aren't so many of these collections frozen in time? Like I get Azuki, and I think you were the one that gave me the example. Hey, there's a green bean out there. What does a green bean do? Does my guy's hair turn green? Does he have all these new powers? And, so it adds to the story, but I guess the more sophisticated, I don't know if that's the right word, you get as a collector, the more you want your stuff, you realize your own mortality. You want that immutability. Like MFers.
You want both. I would disagree in some situations where, so I am a gamer. I also a big fantasy nerd. I think things that tell a story, narration, through the art that can be changed and evolved can be owned by a central set of people. And what the art is the whole progress. It's the whole, and that's what I think Ethereum is amazing for, right? Not ordinals, but which technically ordinals could, but you basically let, let's take Azuki because we're talking about it. They're
Sure.
going to be telling a narrative with your token, right?
Right.
You're not, that's why the whole IP battle is so weird to me, because like you shouldn't, I mean, I think Azuki's is kind of a weird play IP, but like, and that's why I love CC0, because I never concern myself about the IP of these
yeah,
tokens.
copy it, use it as your PFP, like put it on a t-shirt, make money
Exactly.
on t-shirts. My 244 loves you for it.
To tell a story and you're part of that story, that is very fulfilling. Like, I played a lot of MMOs, and when you're involved in an event, even though it was driven by the devs themselves, and the world changed, or you were part of that change, or some of the stuff that you had done has changed, you feel really compelled because it's the moment you lived, and being able to articulate that story back to people was worth it, right? And so I do think there are times when that is really special and can have its own value. But for collectors who just want an unchanging piece of what they purchased at a specific time, I do think ordinals is the best. And I call those artifacts. So I want to stop calling them NFTs, I mean, personally, and I want to say these are Bitcoin artifacts, right? Ordinals are artifacts that are locked in time and space, and that you bought what you bought, and that's not going to change.
Yeah, absolutely. So, obviously Azuki founders, I think they're locked in for 4 years. We're in year 2-ish, right? So they've got 2 more years to really make a dent here. At some point though, wouldn't you agree that things should be locked down and frozen for that permanence, that immutable permanence? I totally agree with you with the story, but at some point, like MFers, I feel like is a perfect example. MFers, I believe, is CCO. I love MFers. I've got one, and I've got early inscription of my MFer on ordinals too. I think it's in the 4,000 range. But those, once you taught me that, here's where you check to see if the contract is frozen, it wasn't for them. And I was shocked because I'm like, there's no utility. The crazies were a derivative off it, but it's not like you need to access the contract. So part of me was like, if anybody should be frozen, fine, you're on IPFS and Filecoin, and there's issues with pinning if you don't pay the bill 15 years down the road. But at some point, freeze the contract, because to me, that MFer, it's such a part of the early CCO history of the NFT and this whole digital ownership movement. I would think freezing would be the first thing.
They could freeze them if they destroyed the transfer owner function, and they set the owner to the dead address or to the 0x0 address. So there is a way to do it. So the problem is that the Zeppelin contracts that everyone was using, like the templates, because a lot of these people weren't like hyper solidity devs. They were decent devs that just used what was already built.
Smart entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah, they just imported in the Zeppelin libraries, which was great. It helps with security, if you trust that these are trusted contracts, but they never had the freeze function built into those templates, which people later realized, like, I could still own the contract to do certain things, but I don't want to be able to update the base URI, so let me just freeze it. So they still have a way of technically freezing it by removing themselves from the owner and setting it to the dead address, and then basically the dead address obviously can never update it again. The dead address will never be able to update the base URI, and so in that realm, it's technically completely frozen. But here, can I pitch you something that I think every collection should start to do is make a mini DAO. Let your collectors participate in the functions that drive the collection, where they have the opportunity to freeze it, not you. If they get together and vote and say, we want frozen contracts, then they should be able to do it. And I think that's where DAOs become more important, where you don't have to use the whole big model. Nouns is like, let's say the most sophisticated model out there, but just small pieces of DAOism, right? Like just, I'll use it like a religion, just DAOism, right? Take this one piece and say, let your collectors choose how they want to interact with each other and with the collection. I think that's going to be something that, I've spent a lot of times thinking about, and I think other artists and builders are going to start thinking about too, because then it's not on the owner, it's on the community to decide what they want from that, right?
That's a good
Yeah,
point. Go ahead, Disco.
I think as a collector, I'm just getting involved in trying to understand, kind of my definition of what's enticing and what I'd want to, kind of get involved with. And I like the notion, I think I'm getting from what you're saying, I like the notion of having the community be able to have input and say, not necessarily on all scope of it, but some of it. Whereas it's not just top down, like founders decided this is what's up and you're dealing with that. So it's kind of the democratization, but it's like then you really could feel more involved with the community and your voice matters. And I would think that that would lead to, more interesting derivative outcomes and, kind of just more creativity, so people feel like, hey, if I have an idea, I can kind of galvanize a group and see if I can get people behind it, as opposed to, well, we're waiting for the founders to come up with the plan and we know they don't have to tell us what's happening. So you're kind of sitting there as almost a spectator in something that you're participating in.
Yeah, and I think obviously not all collections need to operate like that, but I think there's a few really good ones. I think MFers is a really good example of one where a community-driven collection is more important than just, not having it that way.
And I would argue that, and maybe this is a personal preference, but non-utility NFTs, ordinals, or whatever, to me, it's a better play. Again, I'm biased. I love the storytelling aspect of stuff, but the CCO and the just non-utility to me just seems like a more powerful play.
I think it's, I would agree with that sentiment. I think that's something that, if you are going to put more dollars into that space, just like the fine art space, like the trad art, I got in NFTs because I am a trad art collector. So that makes a lot of sense, right? And it's been like that for years, right? Collecting artifacts and fine art pieces and sculptures and all that kind of stuff has been around for, literally our human history. And so it makes sense to have that carryover. I do think, though, that dynamic, evolving, living NFTs have a unique place. And so it's one of those things where I don't want to just outright dismiss them because they are unique. Now, do I value something like that more than I value, an artifact like on ordinals? Maybe not. It would take a lot for me to value something that is changing and evolving and maybe not in the direction I want it to, but I'm still part of that story. One of the best ones that I always look back to is Wagdai. That is fully narration, game driven, very changing, and very centralized NFT, right? Literally, I was a part-time dev to help them with some things. And literally, I have the keys. I could go right now and just change everyone's NFT to a dick butt. And I mean, I have that power, right? But it's cool because we can tell stories with it. Yeah.
Well, and that's what the goblins did. And I think it was a miss. And I think they pissed a lot of people off, and I think it was to get royalties. Now,
they use it in an abusive sense, not in a narration sense, where Wagdai uses it because you live your token in a world, and that world evolves, and there's actions, and those have consequences, and that affects the population. Like we had a huge infection through mushroom, and you could send mushrooms to other Wagdai, and it would change them, like they're infected with Last of Us style stuff. And it was really dope, right? And like those are the type of things we do, but it's all part of a story.
Is everything on centralized servers like DGods or like Nuclear Nerds, or no, it's still at least metadata and images IPFS?
No, Wagdai is full centralized.
It's fully centralized. So you're saying it depends on what you're going for. But how would you? And I don't want to beat this point too much, but 20 years from now, Wagdai was awesome. Like it did really well. In 20 years, I guess some stories can keep going maybe forever, like Tolkien, and you can build it out, or like Star Wars, where you had all those writers back in the 80s, like Timothy Zahn and all these who were writing stories on top of stories when they let them. But aren't you worried that at some point the underlying asset will be gone? Or you're saying that the DAO can fix that and make it more permanent?
Here's the problem with that narration for Wagdai. Every Wagdai is going to burn. That's the whole narration.
We're
a burning maxi. I mean, the whole idea is that there will be no more NFTs. That the whole story is to convince you to continue the story by burning more Wagdai in certain events and things happen. That's the whole point. The whole point is in 10 years, there is no more NFTs. That's the whole story. So it's one of those things that people didn't get, that were buying and hyping it up back in the day early. But I knew immediately. I was like, no, I get where they're going with it. And obviously, I have some insider information helping them work on it. That is literally their end goal. It was a free mint, and they did make a ton of money off royalties during when royalties was popular back in 2022 early. But the whole point was to convince people to, in the story, to burn. And I was the second person to burn, because I got it immediately. Right when they had the space, I was like, they want me to burn this. And I was behind one guy within like one block. And I was kind of sad I wasn't the first one, because I immediately knew, and I fell in love with it, because it's not even, it is meant to not be something you hold forever. It was meant to be this player, this entity that exists for a certain period of time and then to be killed.
Right. That's a very special,
a little bit different. Yeah.
That's a very special use case though. Let's go to Azuki or DGods or whatever that has storyline. And I don't want to pick on anyone. I just like to use examples so people can visualize it better. Like 20 years from now, like, again, like you're semi-permanent on IPFS as long as someone pays to pin, and the Filecoin guys are incentivized to store. So is there a long-term play, or am I overthinking that? There's obviously tons of rugs out there, but what about this long-term storage? Or maybe I'm just the type of collector I don't want.
What Moonbirds did, and same with CryptoPunks, is at any point they can upgrade their contracts and basically make permanent all on-chain art. I think Moonbirds, I mean, I'm not the biggest proof fan, but I do like a lot of the stuff they have put out. And so I think what they did with Moonbirds was really awesome. They left it up, and they let the user pay the gas and say, hey, you want your permanent Moonbird? You want to put it on chain? Go ahead. You can do it. It's all locked up. It's all on changing. And I did that because I thought it was great. I'll probably never get rid of that Moonbird, because I do think mine is pretty freaking dope. But it's just one of those things where I think Suzuki will probably end up doing something similar. I think most people will. Even Yuga, I think they'll move apes on chain. They'll as contracts are getting smarter and the templates are getting safer, because that's the only problem, is people are nervous that if let's say you have this $100 million market cap NFT system, if not larger,
right?
You go upgrade. Upgrade is the devil of blockchain, but also the savior, right? Like Ethereum lives on the ability of it being upgradable. But sometimes you get an issue where you implement something. Bridges do this all the time. Nomad Bridge failed because of an upgrade, and it created a vulnerability, and they got completely wiped overnight. And so they don't want that. They implement an upgrade to go on chain. There's a vulnerability. Everything's wiped. You're dead, right? So there is people get nervous about what they have, right? I've got this market cap. I have this population of people, these users, consumers, investors, whatever you call them. I don't want to lose that. And so they're very risk adjusted to that, and so they won't go upgrade quite yet. That's why I was really impressed with Moonbirds with Proof, because they did that. They didn't have to, but they did it. And that's why I love Nouns, is they're sitting on literally millions of dollars in their treasury. And I know we spend a bunch of money for auditors to come through all the contract upgrades, but we are constantly upgrading the protocol with novel ways. And I think it's having sort of the gall to do that. And be like, hey, it's all experiments. We're all here together to experiment on this chain and like push the envelope of what we can do decentrally. And I think collections hopefully will start to adopt that mindset.
So how would you go, like, let's say Bored Apes, at the end of its total story arc, they're like, all right, we're going immutable, we're going on chain. When you have a JPEG that's too big kind of for the EVM to handle, how would you even do that? Or you're saying there's 100 clever ways to do it, and as technology,
people have put full games. I mean, there are super clever ways to put a lot of information. You can put quite a bit of information on chain in different ways. Now, is it expensive? Yeah, I mean, the gas to do so is expensive to operate that way the first time you do it. So you either pay for it, or you just say, hey, users, it's up to you to choose.
Right.
Which I like that one. Hey, you want to pay the $100 in fees to on-chain it? Go ahead, right? Because 100 times 10,000 is quite expensive, right? Maybe not for Yuga. They got a lot of money.
Yeah, they've done quite well.
They've done quite well.
Yeah, where just keep dropping stuff totally works and makes money, and then everyone tried to follow suit. We go to a bear, and it's like, and cliff,
Right.
So let's get back to Nouns then. So there's two ways we could go. I guess like for the DAO, what is Nouns done right? Because anyone who's looked at Nouns even a little bit knows that it's probably one of the most cutting edge, if not the most cutting edge DAO out there in many respects. Like what from the governance standpoint has Nouns done right?
Yeah, I think in a few ways. One, technology, right? I think we have pushed the boundaries, like I've said, about upgradability, the type of contracts we push out, uh, evangelizing other developers to adopt our methodology, like what Zora does with their tech stack, with what Agora has done with their tech stack, which is sort of like this governance voting mechanism, but also like with the prop house and having people be able to spin up a Nouns DAO whenever they want. Like you could go right now, be like, I'm going to create something that looks just like Nouns, and I don't have any technical feasibility. You could go do that, right? We've built this way to basically print press DAOs, right? Which is incredibly clever. And so I think from a technology perspective, because I'm obviously a dev, I'm a big nerd, I think that's been amazing. From a community and culture, what they've established is the ability to basically, with the sense of proposals, is evangelize different industries to get people, because we're giving people money for basically nothing. When people come to us and say, I have this project, I want to make it nounish, we don't ask for a return. Now, if they want to offer a return, that's great. They can sweeten the pot a little bit. But for us, the nouns, that's never going to make or break a proposal. And it's hard for me to articulate that when I work with proposal builders, people who aren't in nouns but want to get in nouns through proposals. Is like, listen, what you can do is how can you stand out amongst your peers and make it where people ask the question, what is WTF nouns, and like how'd you get to where you are today, like, and they can answer that through the nouns proposal system, right? And I think those narratives are really good because that obviously keeps spreading the word, but that's something that you can't get anywhere else. You can't get, it's free, it's basically free money but like it's the ask is so interesting, right? It's content, and it's a narrative that we can share, not amongst ourselves and the community, but also out external, right? Like the Rose Bowl parade, where we had that on the film, or obviously the Super Bowl ad, even the working with Stupid Buddy on the documentary. And, there's a proposal right now for like $1.5 million to do 50 shorts working with all the top Hollywood studios. Right. Even with the Nouns Esports, which I helped spearhead and founded, we're funding the 2 top 20 teams in both Dota and CS2. Actually, our team plays in an hour and a half too. And like, people are like, this was funded by, this co-op organization, DAO, and yeah, I think it's been super interesting to see how people react to that. Yeah.
It's just fascinating to look at that as, it seems just so open-ended, and it's like, let's try, come up with cool ideas. Let's get them out there. Let's back them. Let's let it go. So it's kind of a incredible incubation potential, in terms of what's going to come out. That's just going to be like, holy cow. And it seems one of the things I always think is the coolest kind of anchor of something or a brand that's coming up is kind of having an air of mystery, what are they all about? I always go back to, and I'm going to date myself a bit, but I always go back to like when Daft Punk was coming out and, no one understood, it's who are they, real? Are they robots? What is this? And everything kind of kept that mystique. And I think that with the WTF and kind of the openness to not really worry about what competitors are doing, or, hey, this is how this has been done. So kind of an openness to explore adds to an air of mystery that can lead to just results that we don't really understand yet. And I think that's really interesting and exciting. It's like, no one really knows exactly where it's going to go. And that open-endedness of it is extremely attractive.
It's one of those things where you want normal people to start seeing these noggles everywhere and be like, where is this coming from? Like, yes. Why is this everywhere? What do they do? And then the answer is they do nothing.
That's so awesome.
But you talk about this, you talk about the free money, but I mean, we saw number 244 and it's right here, and, you paid a pretty penny for it, and, but you're an optimist and you're in it for the long haul, which is great. But I mean, it's not free. People have to get in, obviously, and pay for this. Your treasury is huge, and we'll get to the forks in a bit, but it's not I guess, coming from nowhere. To me, it's almost like a co-op where you're buying billboards all over the country, but like
Exactly.
you guys spent tens and possibly hundreds of thousands to be a part of this co-op, to vote on it, to tap into the treasury. So I guess it doesn't feel fully free to me.
No, it's democratized across the individuals who put in the money for the auctions, right? Like that's where the cost is. And that's why it's very important for someone who is bidding on a noun to understand what they want out of the DAO. There has to be, this isn't something you could hold a noun, but I think you would be a forker very soon if you just came in and be like, I'm just going to hold this noun. Like, you're probably going to fork now. Like
Right.
that's actually has happened, right? To me, when I came in, I had ideas. I wanted to do a few things. Esports was accidental. I'm a huge gamer, so I've always wanted to like obviously be part of esports. I watch more esports than I do regular sports, right? And it was just coincidence that I found someone who came from the esports world and we could put together a proposal to create the organization. But that was one of the biggest outcomes. But to me, it was, I wanted to help facilitate proposals with other people to create really cool shit. It's because it gives you a level of access that you don't get when you're a sponsor or a backer or a funder on weird projects. It gives you this, think of it as like, weird social clout, but in a lot of random direction, right?
Right.
And I wanted to say that like, hey, my cloud is basically the Nouns treasury, right? I could go and introduce myself to folks who want things to be built or, implemented, and they need help. And I just always loved that. Like I'm also an angel investor. And so I love that methodology of being able to help founders to build and create things, because I'm also a creator myself. So Nouns just gave me the opportunity to do that. I think I've sponsored and helped do like 20 something proposals, upwards of, a couple $1 million together. So like collectively. So it's something like I felt like my money was well spent in the sense of what I could do.
Right.
And the end goal, people are like, well, like, what's the end goal? What do you think your noun is going to be worth? Which is hard to speculate, right? But if Nouns truly becomes the most single global brand in the world, and I have a first year noun that represents the effort and the attrition I use to like build that global brand, right? That's kind of a collector's item, right? Like it's like buying, I don't know, the original paper shares of like a signature from like Elon Musk for starting, his company X back in the day that got bought by PayPal, right? Like that probably goes for a lot more money than you think it does, right? I mean, we have a buddy in Speakeasy who collects those type of things. There are collectors that want that. And I think it does become collectible in that large sense of the word, right?
But if it's CCO, I mean, it's not like at some point you package and have an exit strategy. I mean, you can't CCO. And I would think you and all the Noun insiders, the owners would never, even if you could, you wouldn't go away from it to sell to some corporation. But once open, correct?
What? Sorry. Yeah. It's you can't close that door, right? It's completely CCO, and no one has intention of doing so. Really, it's the collectibleness of all the metadata associated with that noun. So like, that's why I also think being a participant, you're actually building value into the noun themselves, or you're creating negative noun. If you do things that are anti-nounish with your noun, you actually might be putting in a discount.
Don't be non-nounish there.
Yeah, exactly. You're an anti-noun. Like maybe that goes for more. Remember, everything in history, and to me, this is going to be a huge platitude, but humans love stories and narration, and anything that points or arcs back to a really good story is worth it and valuable to them. And I think these can easily become that. I think most, any NFT that, goes through that can be that. But like nouns, especially because they do have this interesting mechanic of participating with proposals and voting and all that kind of stuff, right?
Which is somewhat in line with your notion earlier of looking at it as artifacts, right? Like, so you're having something that, hey, this is significant because of its place in history, so to speak.
Yeah, like think about if you could own the guillotine that chopped off, the French queen's.
Your examples are quite dark.
Yeah.
Just want to make a comment.
Antoinette.
I'm just saying is like it had this moment in time.
Take torture
like,
devices, for example. Like,
yeah, exactly. You know,
The reign of terror.
Yeah.
Torture devices. The little did you know.
Yeah, the market for these is crazy. So regarding proposals, like how many, and you don't have to get them right, just give me a ballpark. How many proposals roughly have been made in these last 2+ years, and how many have passed?
Oh, there is a site that actually has all that data. I mean, we've spent at least, man, I want to say, I think it's over 20 million altogether collectively. And definitely somewhere, if I was going to make a wide range, 10 to 20. Over,
Sure.
100% over 10, maybe not over 20. I don't know.
So
Somewhere
10 million from the Treasury
Yeah.
has been approved for certain proposals.
Yeah, over time, over the past 2 years.
And only a noun holder can propose something. We know that, right? And then it has to get this consensus.
You can't, well, there's new methods now. You can go to candidates. So if you click on the DAO dropdown on the website, I can show you a new mechanism that came out called candidates, where this has allowed the funnel to increase for people to like basically propose something and you pay a little bit of ETH. So go to candidates. So you pay 0.01 ETH and you can actually have your proposal not being holding any nouns, right? You can have it here and then you can go sponsor. So I could see these. It's a really awesome method. I could go and sponsor it or give pre-proposal feedback and they can keep updating it. So like a really good one is like, from someone that's like go to prop dates 2.0, that second one.
Okay.
So you can see that there's pre-proposal feedback that they're getting for it, but I could go in there and just sponsor this and just be like, you know what? I love this one. Let's just get it on chain, right? So I don't technically have to put it. I can just like sponsor it now, but I could also just go straight and make my own proposal and put it on chain, right?
And how many sponsors are needed to get this to the next
Right
step?
now, because of the fork, we're back to 1.
Okay.
Because it's based on the number of nouns and issuance. Yeah, it did get up to 2.
Got it. Okay. So now with the fork, so the number of proposals are most not approved. So here's updates.
No, I would say it because of we have pretty strict feedback and it's kind of social taboo and people break it like kind of beautiful. He'll throw up his messages on chain and because he has the nouns to do so, but most of them go through a pretty diligent process because you can't just put up a random proposal. It will even if you've never talked about it and socialized it with people, it's not going to look well. Even if it was an amazing one, it's probably not going to land. People are going to be like, wait, but like, let's talk about it. Like, why'd you put that up so soon? Like, and maybe it could still pass if it truly was, that amazing. But normally it has to go through a few week review process with a bunch of, obviously you need to also talk to the people who hold the most votes. Like a DAO is fully social engineering. You have to be able to discuss, communicate, socialize, and convince voters to vote on your proposal. And if you go in blindly, your proposal, unless it was some home run, is probably
Right.
going right. So I would say good proposals already have the votes kind of secured, and they're just going through sort of the generic feedback process, and then they'll go on chain and they'll kind of know the outcomes. Now there are some very contentious ones, like the burn audit. The burn audit was pretty contentious.
Is that on here? So it looks like there was 408 total proposals, correct?
So you scroll down a bit.
Okay.
Glitch.
That one caught
with the fire emoji. 394. If you click into 394. Yeah.
Okay.
The burn.
So that was
So
cute.
here you go.
Okay.
Here's pretty contentious. 80 versus 66. And this wasn't this isn't to actually turn it on. This is just to audit the contract. So it's paying the money to get a firm that we use to audit our contracts, right? But it did set off a whole bunch of, if we're going to go into forking, this did set off people being like, hey, I don't want this to happen. I think we're going to fork, right?
Interestingly, so it only had 84 and 66 against. So to me, that also says kind of like life and volunteerism. So few people are actually active. Are those numbers right? Or are there guys who hold 13 where it's weighted heavier than you think in there?
Well, remember, all the ones that forked the 50+% of the nouns are removed from this calculation because they're all now gone.
Okay.
So the realistic number, and we should, what I've been telling them we need to add from the client is a full consensus turnout. You can do that on some other clients. Some other clients will tell you what how many people actually just participated in the vote. We are higher than countries in their voting population. We're more closer to anywhere between, I would say, 60 to 70%.
And if I hold 15 nouns, I get 15 votes.
15 votes.
Okay,
Yep.
So it is a pure 1-to-1 based on how many nouns you own.
Yeah.
It's amazing. We've gone this far. We've talked about DAOs. I actually want to ask some more DAO questions, but I think we've danced around it enough. Let's talk about the forks.
Let's fork it.
Fork 1 happened when? Was that mid-September or was that before?
So let's dive into it. So go to the DAO dropdown and we can look at the fork themselves. And it's fork 0 is the one we want. So, click on the DAO drop, like the top header. Yeah.
Got it.
And then go to fork.
Fork.
And then you can dive into fork 0, which is the first one. And here you go. Here's the timeline, 472 rounds.
Wow.
Yeah. And with their reason.
Wow.
Okay. If they gave a reason, dang. So Nikiria, okay, had 2 nouns. Okay, so that answers that question. Wow. I mean, it's just amazing to me. I've been on government boards. I volunteered for stuff, and I've seen a lot of different organizations, and obviously DAOs are fascinating to me. But just look how clean and organized this is. You can see if they want to put a reason, what the reasons are. Obviously, you guys are all talking to each other. Like, to me, this is almost like a Web3 entrepreneurs club that, you've got to almost have a basic understanding just to get there. But once you're within there, it's beautiful how many things you could do with proposals to perpetuate nouns, but also the kind of people that you're talking to are obviously smart folks, probably other VCs or angels or investors, and just people who have been in this space, who get on chain and immutability and art and everything else that this is, that, the normies out there can't even put into words how incredible it is.
Yeah. I mean, there's other examples, like there's a governance contract that Beautiful helped fund, which actually allows you to bribe for votes. So you can stake your noun, which I was for a long time, pre-fork, and people can buy votes and buy proposals from you. So like,
is that almost you're delegating to someone
you delegate.
else?
So delegate is a huge thing. So you can delegate your nouns to other contracts and people, and they can do it. And a lot of nouns are delegated out.
Are you delegated?
No, not anymore, because not since the governance isn't really profitable anymore. But it was for a while where I think I made like half an ETH total over the course of like 3 months.
Oh.
Just delegating out to them and people buying votes. Like, why not? So it's cool. Like, these are the things that get built and attributed, and it's pushed the envelope, like I said. But yeah, so forking is another, I think, incredible advancement, because being very native to crypto, I hark back to 2010 as my first sort of entrance into crypto with Bitcoin. I've been in love with the idea of forks. Going through the Ethereum fork, I participated and included myself into the DAO that made the fork, like the DAO hack, right? The original DAO hack in 2016.
Oh, wow.
That created the first fork. And I was just in love with the ability to basically move forward blockchain, right? Obviously, the core Bitcoin is still very special. And that's why, I still in a Bitcoin maxi with like a bunch of pocket personality. I'm like a split personality disorder where I'm a Bitcoin maxing on one hand, and then like I'm a Ethereum crazy, move protocols forward kind of maxi in a way. And I think forks allow you to do that. Yeah.
I don't have the depth of knowledge you do, but I feel the same way. I feel like so many people I look at are in the Bitcoin maxi camp or the Bitcoin bigger Bitcoin camp, which is ordinals and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, in our group, we know there's a lot of people who straddle both, but I feel like people always gravitate towards one or the other. And I'm like, I like both for different reasons. And Disco and I, when we started this show, that's why we're like, let's not, you know, obviously there's certain chains I'll probably never talk about and they're not worth mentioning here. It's most of the other ones, but I don't also never want to say never to another chain, because having multiple blockchains is also a form of decentralization. Because what you said is beautiful. When you fork something, like let's say quantum computing comes out, or a government, you know, gets that machine and can hack. The beauty is, you know, obviously you've got to be quantum proof, but you can't put the crypto genie back in the bottle. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, yeah, there are going to be many more forks, you know, hard and soft forks, you know, obviously, you know, in past forks can die, right? Like take Ethereum, right? Other than the classic that stayed alive, most of the, and now there's the proof of work fork, but most of them just go the side. They just go off to the side and kind of die out because they're not interesting anymore. There's nothing there to keep you there. And so we'll have many more of those. But there's another use case that I love now for, you know, Nouns is a protocol, but Nouns is like a protocol on top of a protocol, right? It's obviously built on Ethereum, which is a real protocol. But what it allows you to do is create incentive alignment structures where 472 nouns didn't align with the original core thesis. And they felt like they together could do something different, right? Now, whether they wanted to rage quit to get liquidity out or wanted to restart their own, which the first proposal on the first fork just came out, right? What they're going to try to do, and I think I understand what they're doing with it, they're going to make it like an investment DAO. They're basically turning all their ETH that's left in there's 8,000 ETH still in that contract, into Steth, basically into a interest-bearing ETH account, right?
Interesting. So basically they're turning it into a staked ETH. And does that pay at the lower, ETH, like the 3%-ish?
Yeah, so pretty much just grow it as a collective compounding rather than rage quit, because there are a lot of people who weren't, and we can get into the book value versus, you know, the meme value discussion, which is a lot of people bought nouns way less than the book value. And so the forking allowed them to rage quit for the book value. The book value gave them a profitable exit. And so you had a whole bunch of people basically ransom the DAO a little bit. But those,
did Fork Zero, did those guys exit and take their part of the treasury with them, and then they cashed out the treasury?
Oh yeah, most of them did. Yeah.
Okay, so some of them actually left it in there in Fork Zero. What happened to those nouns? Did they go back to the original treasury?
So it's two different things. The forked nouns go to the treasury of the original base chain. So we have 472 nouns in the nouns treasury that we can literally give out. We can dilute ourselves. They don't get counted towards consensus. Or any of the consensus-driven metrics that we have, or population metrics that we have in the contract, but they can be issued out and then reintroduced. We can sell them. We could just give them out. The first one is going to be given out. It's on a vote right now for Bob Burnquist. So Bob Burnquist, the pro skater, will be receiving one of the first nouns from this.
I know Bob Burnquist. I was a huge skater growing up. Let's put it this way: when I listened to your interview before this show, I was like, oh, Brennan, I'm jealous. Yeah,
he's also super smart, like surprisingly smart, not gonna lie. Like he knows his shit. And I think it's an excellent recipient for the first one. But there are now new proposals to send out more of them to very nounish people who might not participate in the auction or have that type of you know, obviously capital to do so, but can contribute in really meaningful ways if you gave them a noun, right? And I think that's the type of people we want. We want shared alignment. But then you have the follow-on. So after you fork the 472, you can then rage quit. It's only a mechanism introduced into a forked a DAO from nouns. And
so these 472, sorry to interrupt, these 472 are the first that forked into Fork Zero. They went separate. You could rage quit, then you get your whatever your I assume
Share
it's
of the
the
pie.
treasury
Yeah.
divided by 472, assuming you have one noun, right? And you get that money, then you get that ETH, then the noun goes back to
burned.
your treasury.
And
Okay.
no, that noun is dead. So the original noun
Oh,
stays, but the forked noun then dies. That's a burned noun.
thank you. I'm
Yeah. So it's
glad I
kind of a
asked.
two-way. It's a
Interesting.
two-way effect. Yeah.
This is a multi-tiered thing
Dude, it's
already.
complicated and very sophisticated. Wow. I mean, it could have. Well, I have my opinions on how it could have been better, and we can get into like my ideas on, which is way more complicated. So there's a simplicity to this, but it is still complicated. Mine was more complicated, but I think has better value for long-term holders.
Got it. I'm gonna interrupt one more time. So if Tapehead here, if that guy rage quit and got it, let's say first he did not rage quit. So then that noun forked. Does the original is he still on the or she on the original? No. Okay, so that one forked over.
They
so
now have. Let's say they forked one. They now have on the fork zero chain or the fork zero protocol contracts. They have a voting token, right? Okay. And if they choose, they can make proposals with that. Like the auctions on a start. So here's what's really cool. The auctions start false, like as in there's no auctions. They can turn it on right now. If they wanted to resell on fork zero new nouns, they can turn back on the auction and they could have a new population of fork zero nouns buying in.
So that Tapehead, let's say that was an early, let's say that was number 10. I don't know what it is, but it was number 10. You're saying they could turn this back on. They could sell it if he didn't rage quit. But if he rage quits, then he burns Tapehead and he gets the, whatever, his share of the treasury.
The book value share.
How does it ever get back to those of you who have stayed with the original and have not forked? Or does it ever?
The noun that was forked goes to our treasury. That's what I'm saying. So the nouns never diminish. So the original nouns is always increasing. We never, unless you purposely go burn yours, there's not a function yet to burn the forked nouns that we collect.
So the original 876 are still there on the non-forked chain.
Yes. On the
base chain. Once these 472 forked, these existed?
It's got new tokens. It's just brand new tokens. Yeah.
Got it. So Tapehead existed in both places because it's just like a Bitcoin fork. You know, we didn't ask for BSV, but we got BSV, right?
We got some free money.
Well, if you could get out quick enough, yeah. But yeah, for sure, or Bitcoin Cash or whatever. That was probably more of the free money. So the Tapeheads, is there a worry then of too much supply with more forks? Because now you've doubled 472, so now you're at 1,200.
So there's never a supply issue because they're just a completely different DAO. Think of Fork Zero has no interaction now with the original nouns. Like there is no cross compatibility. So there is no supply issue. It's like a brand new collection.
But do you have Tapehead now in your
treasury, in the original one? Yeah.
And if he didn't rage quit, they also have it on fork. What do we call it? Fork Zero.
Fork Zero. Yeah, but that's fine. I mean, it's just a voting token for that DAO. And we still have the original voting token, but it's not been issued out. But we could issue it out to someone.
Okay. But
it's all about provenance. So like, to me, the original noun 69 is way more important than the forked noun 69. You know what I'm saying? Like
I would agree with that.
And then once you have a noun, and this is what's interesting, a forked noun can't fork again. So when we give out these nouns, it's not like we're just giving them the ability to like immediately fork and rage quit again. You can't make multiple issuance of the same one, if that makes sense, right? You could go sell it in the open market for value, but you can't fork it again. So it basically becomes these as like unrage quittable ones after they're been forked.
Okay, so Tapehead in now the original treasury, which you guys have 472 nouns off the original chain, if you will. That's probably not the right word.
It's not the right word, but it makes sense to most people. Yeah.
Right. So tape head is there. At some point, you guys might auction or distribute to worthy people. And if, let's say I got in the auction, I got tape head, I cannot then fork and rage quit anymore. Why? I thought forks were indefinite. Why couldn't I do that the second time?
Because it's already been forked. It's a way to not abuse the issuance of the original nouns. So you can't just keep issuing, getting them forked, returning them back. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like keeping it. It's a protection mechanism that just helps keep at least the original book value sane.
Was that a proposal?
It was part of the original creation of the fork proposal. Yeah, it wasn't an addition. It wasn't a minimum. We are now introducing new amendments, which is the burn proposal, and potentially a delay on forking based on new nouns being auctioned, where they have to wait a certain amount of days. So there's 2 new proposals that are going to be coming out that are going to change, again, the forking mechanism.
So delayed sell, and that's fascinating. So they anticipated, knowing that you kept forks active, that this could be a thing. So you could only fork one once. So there will always, this particular tape head, there will only ever be, if it's forked with these 472, 2 different copies of them max.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Wow. This is utterly fascinating. Disco, are you following this, or is this just like, woof?
No, I'm following it. And I just think it's all kind of, it's fascinating. And it seems like the core is just so confident in what's being built that it's like, it's okay if there's, other things, if there's someone who's got it forked or whatever, and it's sitting there, it's like, it's not going to slow down, or impact the overall mission. And I mean, I just want to go back to, at some point, talk about the noggles, and just, I mean,
let's go back to the intro, people.
That's what's sucking me in, it's like, there's the whole imaging and everything from that perspective. But I think the number one takeaway, just from kind of being a fly on the wall on this, is, you certainly wouldn't want to jump into this and not be active. You know what I mean? And Brennan, you said that earlier, like, you want to be you don't want to be just a passive holder or something in this. Like, there's so many cool things to dig into, and it's being implemented in such a way that it's almost setting a blueprint for, a template to a degree of what can happen, and how something could kind of evolve to being kind of a next gen. And I think that the spirit of not being so, secretive or scared of, people learning how things are done or watching things are done, and kind of sharing that, like, that to me is kind of the big theme I take away from all this. It's like the whole culture and ecosystem that's being built is not one based on fear, but one based on, let's try as much as we can, and let's try to make this better and better each time.
Yeah, that's a really good way to articulate it. And I think a lot of people, people who have contributed, and also just random people looking in, feel like this is the destruction of nouns, where the real core, the people who, I think, like you've articulated, are not fearful. They're like, this is cool. Like, we're here we're not going to get everything right, and things are going to break. Let's just give people mechanisms in which they can go their own way, and we'll continue going our way, and they can continue going their way. And what's funny is Fork Zero can actually be a huge success too. Like, if they have a way to turn back on auctions, and they have a different ideology on how they want to use their treasury, and if it's for an investment purposes, by just, hey, let's just accumulate and be a compound interest ETH pool, that's awesome. I probably will go buy back a Fork Zero now, because that might be actually more profitable in the short term than the regular noun, and have both, right? And so what's cool is, but we've made the mechanisms for that to even be possible, which to me is the real more meaningful part. But again, everyone wants to tie to the drama and the destruction. Right. We're all in this bear mindset. We're like, no, everything's gonna die, and this is nouns are finally dying. Let's go.
To zero.
Yeah, everything's going to zero, which, what is fun too. I definitely I definitely enjoy reading those things, and it's kind of funny at the same. It's like masochistic, right?
You can't plug in though, for sure. And it sounds like you're saying the fork, whereas a lot of the negative Twitter timeline was saying it was a bug, you're saying no, that was a feature, and it was built in from the beginning. Yes, this happened, but you're saying this just makes the narrative, the story, and the evolution. if you're a dramatic person, you can, and you were holding a bunch of nouns, you could look at this as the most horrible thing ever. And it, and we are in a bear market, so it could dilute the price of your noun short term. But you're saying in the long run, this is one of the most cutting edge kind of decentralized DAOs, if you will. And this is a feature. And now what? Like it's almost like a corporation, a family run corporation where two brothers, both alpha males, go to the top, and they're like, and then all of a sudden it's like, I can't stand you. Let's stay in the same parent company or something, and let's split off. And like, I'm going head to head with you, big brother. So,
which is cool, and I'm actually happy that not everyone rage quit, and I hope that they give us a run for their money. Like I want to see, competition is always great for any industry.
What
right?
percentage? Do you know what percentage cashed in? Because this is 472. Math is a strong suit of mine, and that is over half.
We can do some quick math. 8,000 divided by 30, because 30 is kind of the rough estimate on what you would get back, and that's how many have remained. I without doing the math. So 8,000 divided by 30. Let's see how many nouns are left over. About half, 266. So I bet about 260 nouns remain.
Okay.
In the fork zero.
Okay, so about a quarter-ish, maybe a little more of the total remained in. So you're saying they could do something cool too. So now not only has the nouns gotten some drama, and the folks like you choose to take the positive side, or like, let's bring it. Let's see. Like, I'm not trying to control the future of this, because a lot of people argued in that fork that you shouldn't allow for people to rage quit and branch off. And you're saying, no, it's a feature. Let's see what happens. This just adds to the story.
The only thing that I wish was implemented, which is harder to implement, is basically kind of pro rata investment over time. As in, noun one that forks book value should be higher than the latest noun that just forked.
Did noun one fork?
Split. What?
Did noun one fork?
No.
But, I was going to say, there's no incentive.
Noun, there's been a few under 10, but noun 13, let's take beautiful NFTs.
Okay.
Right. Noun 13, it should be worth their book value more than the late, like literally noun 800, whatever. There's some in 820s, right?
100% agree.
I think there should have been implemented a curve where by holding and opportunistically, like participating, right? Just by having a noun is still participation, should be valued more. And that also that prevents book value exploitation in the short term, because new people buying nouns at underpriced book value, right? The book value is lower. It's not whatever it is. Like it's a sliding scale. So it's actually really hard to determine that. And if we did it that way, we would have had a less arbitrage, which is the big exploitation. We're trying to prevent arbitrage. We don't want to prevent people forking because they could have a different ideology. We just want to prevent exploitation from arbitragers.
Right. So you get a bunch in the 6, 7, 800s, you get a big mass, you start voting heavy, and the early holders who not only, like you said, have been there longer, I'd call that sweat equity, and they got in at the grassroots. But we all know that in any collection, it's not the only factor, but a lower digit is a massive factor when you start at zero and every day count your way up. I mean, it's a huge factor. I guess on the ordinal side it does. Most NFT collections, we don't care. But God, this is just
so that's the only feature I really do wish. And what's funny and sad though is we might actually be re-implementing it to actually.
It's not too late.
It's no, nothing's too late. These are all upgradable contracts. So we could change the book value calculation today and make a proposal. We are talking about it. So there are a few nouns that were on my side that are now really pushing it to help prevent exploitation again. And it may get implemented. So which is sad for obviously people who forked early.
Right.
But again, remember the calculation of the book value has changed anyway. So you're not saying that, a noun 13 today with even the implemented would be worth, because remember all that money is gone. Like the forked money is gone. We can't use it in the book value calculation anymore, obviously.
Right. Because that part of the treasury went with them. So like I said, we've danced around it for so long. Why these 472 people we have on the screen, why were they so angry? What wasn't Nouns and the Nouns DAO delivering that caused them to be so pissed?
So I'll give you my all opinions are biased, but I'll give you my perspective, and my source of truth, which is about a few individuals saw the arbitrage opportunity. They were known to do this for other DAOs and other contracts and services, and they started buying, knowing that they would have sway. Inevitably, since we had been talking about forking for a while and rage quit, they knew that this could be coming down the line. Now, they did take a risk. There wasn't a risk-free. Some people say, oh, that was a risk-free buy. I'm like, no, nothing's risk-free. Anything can happen, right? So there was a gamble. They put up significant money to accumulate nouns. But then what they started doing, because, they're not dumb people. They're clever.
Were these people working in concert with each other, or people were doing it separately? 100%. Okay, so you're saying there was a plan and there was money behind this plan.
Yeah. And the idea was to basically create a narrative that Nouns is doing bad proposals. They're wasting the money. It's going to just go to zero. All that, again, the bearish narrative.
FUD.
Then people who weren't active just hear that, because that was the social signal, right?
Well, and I will say outsiders like me, because when I got my CryptoPunk, I was looking at Nouns as well. And this is kind of before that, but when this started to go down in my timeline, I was like, oh, it's the money is being wasted. So that is the narrative I got. And some of these people with big followings, that's why ex-influencers drive me nuts. They, it's on the ordinal side too. You got a couple people controlling the narrative. Yeah. And I'm thinking like, we've got our little chat group with the people who are probably the most understand ordinals better than anybody. And I'm biased because we're in there, but the narrative of the first Selden moment for ordinals was not necessarily in line with what my thoughts were. It was the first time I realized, like, you got money and you got influence, you can make a big change. And you're saying, and these guys saw these degens, or whatever you want to call them, or these entrepreneurs saw arbitrage opportunity and they went for the jugular.
Yeah. And then, and that's the thing, is that's why I can never chastise these people, because that is crypto. Crypto is literally it's an aggressive playground, right? It is permissionless and restrictionless. And so, like, if there is a money opportunity, someone will take that opportunity to fill that gap. There always will be that, right? They're market makers, right? The thing that I thought was sad is that the people who were misled by the narrative that they were spinning, and people who had bought them for significant value, like, let's take Beautiful as one of those, but Beautiful is a different person in terms of the way he thinks. He actually has generally his idea, and was very much an ideology play.
And in his defense, he had number 13. I assume he had at least several others.
All less than 100 nouns. Yeah, they're all very early. Yeah.
And if we know anything about him, he is a very smart person who is very makes decisions on his own. I don't see him getting swayed by a bunch of arbitrage fudsters coming in. It
was a bad example. I'm trying to think of someone.
No, and I just wanted to throw that out there because he's in the CryptoPunk community and the Nouns community, like, he's clearly a very, like, he thinks stuff through, and he came to this conclusions on top of this arbitrage group that came in and decided it was the right move.
And he didn't fork in fork zero. He forked with the next forked, which is a misalignment with Nounders and founders and all that kind of stuff. But so someone like Beautiful NFTs, who did put a lot of money in early, who wasn't very active, like some non-active members, they listened to the social, you can scroll through that. Oh, this is the fork one. Yeah. And I think they were like, okay, maybe it is wrong. Like, this is the loud voice in the room and I can get some liquidity back, but also everyone needs liquidity. Having pure liquidity is sometimes greater than any market condition, right? Like, knowing that you will be able to legit get 30 ETH back equivalent is better than thinking that your noun is worth more than 30 ETH on the open market. Like, it just is, right? Because it's guaranteed. And so I think a lot of people were like, listen, I could go park this anywhere and probably do okay, right? And they just took the opportunity. So I would say a majority of those people in the 472 weren't arbitragers. They were just, hey, liquidity's good. You know, I could sit this one out. And actually, I think maybe a lot of them were the ones that actually stayed in the fork zero. Maybe there is a new ideology change and what have you. But
it's interesting. I will say they almost sometimes just knowing that the birdcage door is open, that doesn't mean you fly out, but you have the option for it to be more open. And that's what fork zero gave them. And that you're right. It is very interesting that it sounds like roughly half did not have rage quit, right?
And what's cool is because they can always rage quit, right? They're never not guaranteed that original base amount, right? Which is cool.
They're guaranteed 1/472 of each one they have. That number doesn't change, right?
Well, I guess, okay, hold on. No, it could change, actually. Sorry, they are risking new risk, and maybe they haven't thought about this because I just didn't. I was like, oh, wait, no, that's not true.
Ooh,
sorry, if someone does a proposal on the new chain to liquidate all the ETH there, no, they would lose their rage quit amount. So it isn't guaranteed.
Well, why would they ever lose it?
If it came from a proposal?
But yeah, someone could make a proposal that says, give me all the 8,000 ETH to this address. And let's say it passes by whatever means.
Oh, like the arbitrageurs literally had 51%. They're like,
yeah.
Oh God. But in the first contract that could have happened too. But the Nounders have such that 10% plus enough people to be on their side. I mean, but it could happen.
Yeah, but that can always happen. But there was never a rage quit. You could never just exit liquidity your first noun. Like there's no rage quit on the base fork. Like I can't just go exit. I have to first join a fork and then exit. So it's this weird two-step mechanism.
We need an infographic for this, like where your noun is and what your options are, you know, because this is definitely a mental twister.
That they're staying in the fork, not knowing that technically if they do start doing proposals that move ETH around, that they might be losing their rage quit value. But maybe they do. I don't know.
Interesting. So these second 69, and I put beautiful at the top here, and that was kind of his message before. So he's saying he lost trust in the founders.
Yeah.
And the guy that I know, his number 73, he paid a guy to get a tattoo, and now he feels horrible for that guy. I don't blame him. So
he's great though.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's saying, hey, now you can get it removed. Why did the 69 come? I heard somewhere it was just like they weren't really paying attention. Now they're like, oh wait, me too. I wanna jump out as well.
Oh, you're talking about Machi's from the first fork?
I'm sorry. No, I'm talking about now fork 1, aka the second fork.
The 69.
Why did the 69 leave?
So people really don't like the burn. I don't know if you guys looked up the burn mechanism, but it is straight up a knife at the throat. If we don't spend enough ETH from the treasury, we will burn it. We will literally burn the ETH.
And that passed.
The audit is up for, the audit is actually about to pass, but that's just auditing the contract to burn the ETH, not implementing it. So we don't have to implement it yet. It has to be another proposal. We're just auditing the contract. That's 394.
394. Okay, so
so that made a lot of people who were staying in. They really hate this idea of burning money. By the way, I love burning money. I think it's one of the most novel concepts in crypto that you can literally, with the easiest sense, just light things on fire. And honestly, we do it for Ethereum every single day, and it creates sound money. It's actually a good mechanism.
Yeah, deflationary asset. Yep.
Yeah.
Don't ever run for office, because someone, if they ever find this podcast, they'll be like, Brennan, I just burn money. They'll put a cigar in front of you, like, and
it's just
why do I keep losing?
Yeah, it's a really interesting mechanism that can be played in a set of autonomous systems, right? It's like that's why I love Stacks, which is STX, which is built on Bitcoin, which is literally a proof of burn. They burn Bitcoin. Like that's their entire protocol, is incentivize their system by burning Bitcoin, which is, I freaking love that. Yes, burn more of my deflationary currency, please. Right? Like that's the concept. And so people, and the idea is that we should never have to implement the burn, as in the burn should never be triggered, because we should be spending. So the whole cycle, again, it's all macroeconomics, right? It's all incentive and disincentive systems. And the idea is that because there's a burn and people know that when the burn is going to happen, and it's what's called excess ETH value. It's the auctions over a period of time minus the current book value of the treasury that you have, right? So let's say the treasury says every noun is worth 30 ETH, but the auctions have been running over a period of time where the average price value of a noun is now 15 ETH, right?
Right.
That's a 15 ETH excess ETH per each noun. So the burn will say, hey, we're going to burn that excess to bring down the treasury down to an average of 15 ETH if you don't spend it or the auctions don't come back up over a period of time. So with that knife on your throat, you'll start getting proposals. Soon you're going to get shitty proposals. You'll get hundreds of really shitty proposals.
Yeah.
But then you'll start getting good proposals that will compete with each other over the excess ETH, because right now people think we spend too much. We don't spend enough. We're not trying to hoard ETH. We're trying to spend down ETH to keep promoting the brand, right? And so the idea is that we need highly competent executors and operators to come give us proposals that make a lot of sense. And it's hard to do that without some sort of disincentive or incentive system. And so we think this will self-perpetuate better and better and better proposals, knowing that, hey, if we don't spend it, we're burning it. And hopefully we never have to burn, but...
Yeah, but a corporation, let's say there's a really good idea, but it's a lot of money, and the really good gems come every once in a while. If you have this burn mechanism that's literally like you've got a village and you have to keep moving it because the lava keeps getting closer every day. Yeah. Like sometimes you're reacting like, well, if we don't spend it, we're going to burn this 2000 ETH anywhere, whatever the number is.
So
no, like I'm not even holding one. I'm already stressed out.
Yeah, that is the big negative, is like, listen, there are some opportunities that will require more time and more money. And if we're constantly having this threat of burning it, how do we fund massive projects? The thing is, we haven't had any of those. Nothing over, I mean, the highest one right now is the one on chain, which is the 1.5 million to make 50 shorts from top producers in the film industry. Right.
Wow.
And that's the highest one we've ever gotten. And we only get 2 or 3 of those a year. That's not a lot, right? Most of our spend is actually small, anywhere between 50 to 300,000. And what I'm saying is, like, until we get to that point, I think the auctions will catch back up because we'll be doing such interesting things that there's this mechanism. But we don't know. Of course, like we said,
right.
We can implement this. We can inevitably just be like, oh, we're about to burn it. Technically, before the burn, we could all then vote to turn it off. So let's say we vote to turn it on, and there is a quite large window, and it gets closer. The whole DAO could go ahead and vote to turn it off right before it happens. We're not locked in to the burn. So technically, at the last moment, all of us could be like, wait, maybe this was a bad idea. We didn't get good proposals. It wasn't really working as intended. Let's maybe just shut off that burn function for now, or not. Or we say, hey, let's just see what happens. Let's burn it. I don't know.
Yeah. Do you think? Because I used to write jokes for Bankless DAO and this little part of it called the rug. I wanted nothing to do with the bigger DAO. I feel like my opinion on DAOs is it's very hard to have a DAO run a people organization, because at some point you need someone in charge to say, like, here's the money, dude, like, do it. We're not this isn't egalitarian. And you've started and probably sold a lot of companies. I've started companies, and so has Disco. Like, how do you reconcile with that with the Nouns DAO?
So my approach has always been, some people call them pods, I call them sub DAOs. The idea, like Nouns Esports is a good one. So Nouns Esports operates as a a Nouns affiliated organization, where we are, again, remember I told you about DAOs are grouped in different buckets. We have a multi-sig that holds the funding that we get from Nouns. I think we've accumulated over time, upwards of over $1 million, and we're going to go back and ask for more to fund more teams and stuff. And then we have a proposal system within our own Discord where people we have a contributor call every Friday, but we are run by about 8 people. We have 8 multi-sig signers, and we are sort of the head of that snake, right? And then there's one leader, which is Sasquatch, who really does the day-to-day work of, like, actually making sure that Nouns Esports is successful. And that really is like kind of his full-time job. And I think that's been very successful. And there are other sub-DAOs that do something very similar and operate in that mentality, where Nouns is more of this top funnel of where funds should flow into, where you'll start getting these more non-autonomous groups that are centrally controlled to start to distribute in their vertical, right? Their vertical slice.
Okay. So the big difference is Nouns has a significant treasury. It's like you said, a lot of people argued it couldn't literally spend its ETH fast enough. So when you have money, obviously you have incentivized people because they can actually make a living off of having a proposal or doing work within or without with an accepted proposal on the DAO. And that's where it's different. Because I always saw DAOs as like if Uniswap, let's say the three of us invented Uniswap, and the smart contract basically, wouldn't that be awesome? And the smart contract back in the day, and it literally just said, okay, we're splitting it in thirds, and it contractually just smart contracts each way. To me, like that is the essence of a DAO, like a simple programmatic code set that a group of people get in, and it literally just funnels the money to each person. Like that's the simplest form in my mental model. Is that like the right way to look at it?
Yeah, a multi-sig wallet is the simplest form of a DAO.
Okay.
Yeah.
So explain to me, I think this was more pregame show. So you said there's we had a whole episode on NFT storage, and there's kind of three levels of there's purely on chain, there's off chain decentralized, which is IPFS, and then there's literally centralized, like stored on WordPress instances or probably AWS or Google. Yeah. You said there was somewhat of an analogy in the DAO world. Could you, because DAOs are fascinating to me, could you explain the different DAO structures?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's take, we were talking about Yuga, and they issued ApeCoin, and there's like this Ape DAO, right? And if you own Ape, you can vote with that, but the voting mechanism is through Snapshot. So Snapshot is a way to do on-chain signature collecting for a certain token, right? So your signatures are on-chain in terms of what you own and in your contribution and sort of how your vote is going to be used in the Snapshot. But to create the snapshot is off-chain, is done by a few people, probably, usually a multi-sig wallet, right, that owns it. But also the issuance of the money is done through those signature holders, right? It's not like if I wrote a proposal that says, hey, give 10,000 ApeCoin to write this comic book, to make this comic book, and everyone voted on it, it doesn't transact the money. The money doesn't just autonomously then come into my account that was approved. It has to be done by a series of multi-sig owners that say, oh, we're going to respect the vision of the people. It's more of like a delegated, right, DAO where, and I don't really know if there are terms that coin these type of organizations, but it's a different type of DAO where we delegate our votes to some specific set of people, and then they make the decision to send the money, right, or do something, right? WagDai has that. The Forgotten Runes DAO has that. It is a very easy model where the token voting is decentralized and permissionless, right? No one's permissioning me to buy Ape. No one's permissioning me to buy a Forgotten Runes token or a WagDai. But the transaction and the execution of the proposals are done centrally through a party. So that's like I would say that's the step down from like the pure form of like everything is autonomously transaction.
So everything on Nouns, what should we call it? Let's try and name these. Why not? Like, so you've got the Ape DAO. Is the delegate DAO.
The delegate DAO, which is a very common model. Yeah.
And we're calling Nouns a pure DAO, right? Yeah. Okay. So we've got pure DAO, we've got delegate DAO, and just as an aside, I think with all the ApeCoin, aren't those delegates, I think they were paid a pretty big sum of money. Yeah. And I don't know if that ever went through, but when I saw the sum,
they were. Yeah.
And these guys were all justifying it. And I'm like, I don't begrudge anyone, but it sounded like old insider ape holders, they've got all the clout. They've known each other for years, got those positions. And we're talking several hundreds of thousands of dollars, probably not to have to do a
A
whole
whole
lot.
bunch. Yeah.
And I don't want to ruffle feathers, but that's what it felt like
Yeah.
to me. I love my CryptoPunks, and obviously Yuga owns those, but I'm not a huge ape holder, but I also am fascinated by how their whole ecosystem works. But that one, I was like, I'm kind of glad I don't own ape coin, because that sounds like it could easily be abused from a delegate.
Yeah, but it's one of those things where it is transparent because it is technically on a blockchain, to where if they were moving money around indiscriminately, right? People will be like, wait a second. I mean, there are sleuths out. I mean, if you think no one's looking at your
Yeah, good
contract,
point.
someone's looking at your contract. Like,
It's on chain, dude.
it's on chain, man. Someone's looking. You might not think so,
GLGL.
someone's freaking
So
looking.
you're
So
saying almost the social aspect of that,
yeah,
like you might be able to screw people over, but you better have a good country to kind of hide in, because the ape community
yeah.
might be looking for you.
Yeah, and again,
Okay.
in that transparency is protection. So again, that is why
Okay.
these type of DAOs work, is because there is a social beholdens to
Okay.
your voting population.
Yeah, you don't want to lose your spot in the pecking order or whatnot.
Exactly. And then you take a step down even from that, where basically, and this is kind of like, these are the investment DAOs. These are kind of like Flamingo, Lao DAO, where it's very permissioned. You can't just get into the DAO. The DAO itself is really just a glorified multi-sig. It's really one step above just having a multi-sig, right? It's really just a multi-sig. They maybe have votes, but a lot of the votes themselves are probably just, very simple
Right.
programming notions. And I think, I mean, they're not bad. They work. I mean, I do think for an investment DAO, you have to do KYC. You have to have, right, all the legal necessities to be able to operate an investment organization like that. So it makes sense, right? And then again, going one step down is you just have a multi-signature wallet that multiple people can participate in. And they all have huge use cases everywhere. It's just sort of
Right.
like step.
Well, and the investment DAO obviously can cross over into the meat suit world, right? I mean, you've got
exactly.
Caitlin Long in Wyoming trying to get DAOs to be this recognized thing. I assume most investment DAOs probably are registered there. So you're saying it's almost like between fiat and crypto, you're creating this bridge, and they're all meeting. Obviously, the pure DAOs are purely on the crypto side. The delegate DAOs somewhere in the middle, but the investment DAOs also building the bridge from the fiat side, all trying to meet to create a better structure.
Using the term DAO, because sometimes they use it. I'm like, it's not autonomous. You permission, and basically, to me, to be a DAO, you have to have permissionless. So I would say the first two I talked about are real DAOs. They're non-permissioned.
So even delegate DAO, you're saying is permissionless enough to be permissionless, or no? You're saying investment and delegate.
These investments, I don't think are permissionless enough. Like you have to do KYC. They can reject you. Right? There's no, you can't sell your share in the open market. You can't just be like, oh, like a permissionless DAO means I can go transfer and trade my vote to anybody else. Like that's a real autonomous DAO. Like there's no restrictions on that, unless it was already built into the protocol that have restrictions, right? But again, that's something that's voted and can be autonomously executed. Where the investment DAOs are just, again, they're just papered up and they just namesake them DAO, but they're not quite DAOs.
Right. Well, it's like Spirit DAO and Azuki. Like they're doing great stuff. They're obviously some of the biggest whales, and they hold a million spirits. And they're doing fun stuff with comic books. Like these guys are whales, but they're also they're super into being holders. And it sounds like you call it a DAO. It's probably handled in Excel spreadsheet.
Cool organization.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just kind of a group. I think people have, but it's one of those things. It's like Band-Aid. It's like people just take the name of what it is and they're like, cool, I like associating my thing with that name. And it's like, okay, it's not a decentralized autonomous organization. It's just an organization, but that's cool.
So it's more DAO-ish.
It's DAO-ish. Yeah, it's DAO-ish. Yeah, exactly.
It's like back in 2014, 15, 16, 17, it was like blockchain, where all these VCs are like, we're in the blockchain. And remember, and Andreas is like blockchain or BS, like it was all about how realistic this was, or just using it to just raise money or just jump on a
Yes.
bandwagon that you don't understand at all. And I'm sure some of these investment DAOs are they're smart and they're doing it
Oh, incredibly
KYC
smart.
and yeah, and
Yeah.
they're VCs in this space. So it makes sense that they would use Caitlin Long's and Wyoming's DAO structure to kind of be not cutting edge from our perspective, but cutting edge from Wall Street's
Just a corporate, yeah,
right,
corporation with a, yeah, exactly. No, they're definitely in that more direction. And so maybe DAO just, its word is broader than its original intent. It's become more things than it is. So, but yeah, but I think those buckets are like kind of the core groupings of these type of DAOs, right?
right.
Cool.
Yeah, this has been absolutely fascinating. You've definitely covered all the stuff I wanted to talk to. I've been taking notes, just furiously trying to understand the DAO. But the cool thing is obviously you're neck deep in it and just have really thrived and are so positive about the nouns and the forks and almost embracing this new chaos and really defining what a DAO is. Like, where do you see DAOs going in the future? Obviously, we've discussed these three main kinds. I'm sure there's a million ways you could slice and dice this, but where do you see Nouns DAO going, and how can this help other DAOs thrive, in a world of S Corp, C Corps, LLCs, and sole proprietorships?
Yeah, and I think it kind of harks back to what we were talking about before with like collections, just adding mechanics of DAO like things, right? The Daoist mechanics. Um, I think people will start to embrace those more and let more people be involved at these low levels. And so I think more things that start happening, right? You know, it's the idea of the post gold rush era, right? Everything's got a gold rush, so you have all of these cheap immutations and like a bunch of, but you have some really good stuff, and that good stuff stands out over a long period of time, and then people innovate on top of that or try to replicate that, and so your next wave of innovation comes from the survivors, right? So I think we'll start to see less copy paste Zeppelin NFT contracts and potentially more community driven DAO like contracts, things that give the flexibility to the community. And I think that's really where we'll start to push that, tokens in the art is a big part of it, but it's really the community that drives it, and giving the power back to the community is probably the most significant thing that I think blockchain has done in the NFT space, right? Outside of just the pure fungibility of a cashless payment system, harking back to Bitcoin's white paper.
Yeah.
But I do think now we have a way to evangelize and give power to communities, which I don't think was possible without these type of, these facilities or these protocols.
That's very well said. Disco, do you have any other questions for DAOs or nouns or the future of all this stuff?
I'm just, there we go. There we go. I'm really just processing I love what you just said about kind of the post gold rush where, kind of the things really tend to get built in the right way then. And you're not, Chicago's brought up but are we able to do this because of that? And it seems like some of the constraints that may be pre-existing are going to be addressed and iterated to the point that there really are no limits as to where it can go. And yes, I love the notion of disruption and understanding that with disruption, there'll be stumbles along the way, but let's embrace that. Let's go fast. Let's see what we can get done. And being able to kind of create, it's very utopian if you really think about it, right? And being able to, create this and do it and looking at nouns as kind of a breeding ground for what can be moving forward is kind of where my head keeps going to. And I'm super grateful for the time and just being able to kind of just soak up some of the knowledge. But I'm also, uber inspired about, just that notion, because it's a fascinating notion. You can't say, oh, a DAO isn't interesting. But then there's always, yeah, but what about this or what about that? But you know what? It's so in its infancy still, you know, and
Yeah,
you're
absolutely.
right. Once the shine's off it and everyone's not staring at it and being like, hey, everything's a DAO and oh, it's going to save
I mean,
everything.
think about
You
2 years. We're coming on. We've just passed the 2 year mark. 2 years into Bitcoin is when I found out about Bitcoin, and that was so goddamn early. Like,
yeah.
it's just our timelines are so skewed based on what we've witnessed that in reality, though, is they're so short. Yeah.
Yeah, it takes time to develop something, especially if it's breaking, you know, formats and grounds and is a whole new movement. So I think everyone's just got to have more patience. And, you know, yes, you can look at the banter and the FUD and all that. And you can, I think you have a good perspective. Like you can kind of tune into that to be entertained to a degree, but you have to zoom out and look at where things are headed and that these things are being built and iterated. And what we can imagine right now is just the beginning of what's going to be imaginable in 6, 12, 18 months. Not to say 5, 10, 15
I was going to
years,
say,
you know?
better to say 15 years. I was like, oh, months, dang. Like
Yeah.
but it is iterating that quickly. It's
Very
insane.
quickly. Yeah.
It's insane. So Brennan, we can't thank you enough for coming on the show and going deep on nouns, but really on DAOs and how all this progresses. Before we part ways, is there anything you want to share kind of what you're working on now?
Yeah. I mean, I'm always building something. I've been kind of a builder in this space. One of the things going back to community that I felt was missing was sort of openness and transparency in conversations. So you know, going back to Clubhouse, where conversations, you had these really good intimate places where people could share and, you know, have knowledge, all live stream audio, that kind of stuff. And then you have, you know, X Spaces, you know, aka Twitter Spaces, still permissioned from Twitter. I always felt like an agnostic tool that allowed people to communicate, very good DAO tool because every communication should be public. And it's one of the notions where I've started becoming more public with what I share versus private. I feel like private conversations more often than not could be public. And people can benefit from the knowledge that others have and that they're willing to share. And so I have been working on a tool called tavern.fm, and it is to try to make live stream audio conversations more public, more agnostic. And you know, it started as a way to service Web3 in communities and DAO communities. I mean, my biggest one is still running one with 4156 for nouns, but I personally feel like if something like this were to work with reporters and activism groups, advocacy groups, even campaigns, political campaigns, in a place where you can listen more often and engage with these groups and these politicians at kind of this like base audio level, right? Where it's not polished, it's not cleaned up, it's not sort of manufactured. Because I think we're coming to a big problem of information where things are going to be manipulated, and sometimes in person. Well, some people say you could have like AI synthesized voice, but we're not quite there yet. But the idea is that I feel like you break down the barrier and you just allow, you know, just like what we're doing right here. We're just allowing open dialogue about topics that we care about or that we find interesting. And I think more of that happening is good. So, yeah.
For real.
That looks really cool. So, you know, it's funny. This is a show about decentralization. It's called Decentralized Dawn. And Disco and I are scratching our heads like, you know, how do we promote on YouTube? How do we promote on Twitter? It's like, you know, those algorithms they have a mind of their own, right? So how would a group like us, or would we benefit by using Tavern and something more decentralized?
Yeah, so we're not a good top funnel in terms of getting an audience there, right? But we're an agnostic funnel where wherever you post this, anyone could log in. I mean, that's the goal is have a very open, universal logging in system, right? But what we provide is way more creative tools in terms of the things you can do to engage with your audience, as well as have better playback to be able to get information out to, you know, if you don't want to listen to me talk, you could be able to go to where, you know, the audio track of, you know, Disco or Chicago and get to the meet there, or, you know, be able to see a living replay of what happened, which I don't think you can't really get with Spaces at this point. So that's kind of
you're right, because Spaces get kind of buried after a while. And you're saying like, let's say a big event happens. Like I know but to prep for the show, I listened to your discussion with a reporter and WAG on just the nouns and the nouns fork. And like you said, I think I had to wait like 11 minutes to find him. Like, where are they? I went to like 2 or 3x and finally found the conversation. But you're saying the beauty is it's almost like it happened at a place and time. There's something topical. You had this discussion, and then it's there to be indexed and found publicly for other reporters, other advocacy groups, or just other people who want to learn.
Yeah, exactly. And there is a tool, and it's maybe not, I should fix it, but there is a way to actually, the middle section where you see speakers, you can actually click onto exactly where someone was speaking on the line and go to right to that moment. I should probably make that more obvious, but it is really nice to be able to, like, so if you pulled up one of them, I can show you. But anyways, yeah, I mean, I do want to make it really easy because that is actually a problem where people don't know where the real content is. And so I'm actually working on a few things. One thing is using an LLM to use the transcripts plus the activity in the tavern to surface what I call tavern moments that will be highlighted. So you know where critical information is actually being shared. And then another thing is
what is LLM?
Large language model. So this is like machine learning for being able to disseminate. Yeah, it's like ChatGPT is a
Thank you.
Yeah. And then for decentralization and censorship resistance, because we will have people, if we get big, we'll use this in probably morally wrong ways. And I, will be asked to shut those people down, but I do think that people will abuse that, governments will abuse that to shut down probably good actors,
right?
Trying to share, knowledgeable information or, novel information. And so we're going to allow people to export and basically use decentralized hosting directly. So you'll have the full HTML page to review and playback plus decentralized audio and everything that happens. I'm even figuring out a way to get it on an ordinal. So it is very expensive. I'm talking about like it would cost you a Bitcoin for like a 20-minute conversation to inscribe and chunk, but it is possible.
Wow. So there's sky's the limit. This sounds fascinating. Yeah. We'll definitely dive in and check it out more. Brennan, thank you so much for your time. This has been enlightening for me. I mean, I followed Nouns for a good 3 or 4 months, and I actually wound up buying a CryptoPunk, but I've always loved Nouns. I've always loved the ethos of it. And now that after talking to you, I realized like even following it for a couple months, I had just scratched the surface on the potential, both at the Noun level and obviously the pure DAO level. So thank you for your time.
Well, thank you all for having me. Really appreciate it. And anytime you want me back on, I would be more than happy to.
I think we will definitely take you up on that. So thank you, sir, and have a good one.
Thank you.
Awesome. Cheers, y'all.